I am David Lee, and I am with the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault and Prevent Connect, and I am working with Futures Without Violence, and I'm joined today by Debbie Lee of Futures Without Violence. How are you doing, Debbie?
Very well, thanks, David.
Well, it's wonderful to have two Lees leading today's session.
Cousins.
Cousins, we like to say, and so we're going to be having this, I think, really important discussion about policy work in building teen healthy relationships, learning the lessons learned from the Start Strong initiative. So before we go any further, let's just talk a little bit about the technology so people can be familiar. We do have a text chat, and people have already been writing in the text chat, so you would appear on your right-hand side of your screen, and you can just write in and let us know, and people have been writing there. We do have some polling questions that actually we'll be doing one very shortly, so I will a question for you, and you'll be writing the answers in the polling chat. We do have the slides, and a recording of today's webinar will be available on a website, and you can see that on the slide. I will also go ahead and post that in the chat so you can be able to get a copy of the slides, and after the session is over, we will have a recording that will be available. So I have just posted that into the web conference. If you want, you also can be able to send a private chat to the hosts, and so you can go ahead and just, if you have questions for private chat, let us know to help. And if you also need help with the system, you can call Adobe Technical Support, and they're at 800-422-3623, and there's many ways that you can be able to interact with us. As you can look at the top of your screen, there's a little, looks like a little hand wave type of figure, and you can give different messages to us, such as raising your hand, and you can just click on that to raise your hand if you want to be able to get a pointer, ask us to speed up or slow down, or there's even options for applause and laughter if you like any of our humor. We now are going to just get a little bit of an question for the audience to just get a sense. We want to get a sense of what type of organization is here, so can you please write in the chat what best describes your organization? What type of organization are you with? And go ahead and write in the chat, and I will do my best of analysis to see what type of organizations that we have people doing. So we have a domestic violence coalition, a state health department, domestic violence, sexual violence organization, DV organization, tribal, dual sexual assault, domestic violence. I'm seeing a lot of dual domestic violence and sexual assault agencies or domestic violence shelters, a university cooperative extension. A lot of people here appear to be from dual domestic violence or sexual assault agencies and also domestic violence agencies. So Debbie, I see we have a statewide Nancy from up in Oregon is a statewide training and technical assistance coordinator, and so we have several health departments, and we do have the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center. So Debbie, I see we've got a lot of people, mainly from the domestic violence and sexual assault organizations and some health departments and a few others joining us. So it looks like we got a nice wide collection of people who are joining us. Great to see Hannah from a teen pregnancy prevention program. Well, great. Well, with this, thank you very much for sharing what type of organization. That's helpful for us to get a feel. I want to introduce today's speakers. I'm really pleased to be able to have joining us two leaders in the field who are people I have tremendous respect for the work they do. So we have Barry Rosenbluth, and she's with Start Strong Austin, Safe Place over in Austin, Texas. How you doing, Barry?
Good. Hi, everybody.
Great to have you joining us and sharing the experiences that you had in doing your policy work. And we're also joined by Emily Austin, who is with Start Strong Los Angeles and the organization Peace Over Violence. How you doing, Emily?
I'm great. How's everyone else?
Wonderful.
Well, they're not going to be able to answer.
Be able to answer, but I will answer for everyone. They're really excited about today's session to be able to join us. So wonderful, and thank you. And you're going to be sharing your insights with this, and so feel free to, Barry and Emily, to chime in as you have points that you want to make. I know there's also several slides that you'll be doing. So I want to hand the podium over to my colleague, Debbie Lee. And Debbie, can you describe what the Start Strong initiative is?
Absolutely. Thank you, David. Sorry to bore some of you who have been on some of the past webinars, but just want to take a few slides to talk about the initiative. Basically, as you know, it was a 4-year initiative from 2008 to 2012, and we were really exploring the innovative and practical solutions to prevent teen dating violence and promote healthy teen relationships among a very young population, 11 to 14. Most of the work has been done more in the high school range. So the foundation, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and Blue Shield, wanted to really kind of go up the river, as we say in public health. The Futures Without Violence was the national program office, and we also were fortunate to have the work of Finn Partners for our media and communications work, working with the 11 communities, as well as RTI out there in North Carolina on the evaluation, which will be reported in our next webinar. Then I wanted to talk a little bit about the communities. As you are probably very familiar with some of them, there were in fact 5 domestic violence and sexual assault organizations, the Idaho Coalition, Safe Place, who is represented here today out of Austin, Sojourner over there in Rhode Island, Peace Over Violence, who has done long-time work out of Los Angeles and the Family Violence Law Center. We also had a variety of organizations that were health-based, and one youth organizing organization out of Bridgeport, Connecticut, which really brought a lot of expertise that the groups did not have as much of. Also, I want to just point out in Wichita, Kansas, we had Catholic Charities who really contributed a lot around technology and just helping remind us how difficult the work it is in some of our communities. The approach, which I think many of you are familiar with, it was a very traditional public health approach, a socio-ecological model. It was one in which we felt was needed to really create a successful prevention, multifaceted approach. So there were 4 basic elements. One was to engage and educate youth in and out of school settings, to educate and engage teen influencers. We really focused on parents and older teens, as well as other professionals who come in contact with this younger population. Our role today is to talk about the work done around changing policy and at the school level, and we did a lot of work in policy in other sectors as well. And lastly, there was a lot of creativity. I think that's what makes this initiative really unique. The communities really took off in promoting social norm change, working with teens, working with the arts, technology, and creating very creative social marketing and communication strategies. So, David, I now turn it over to you.
Thank you, Debbie. And so we're now going to be talking about the lessons learned from policy from Start Strong initiative. And so I'm going to start with Emily Austin. And Emily, can you work by defining what policy is?
Yeah, and I think this is a really critical place to start the conversation around policy because it often is very daunting for folks. They feel like policy is only housed in our national and state laws. But really what we're talking about today are high-level overall plans, embracing general goals and acceptable procedures. And that even comes from Webster's definition of policy. But I feel like it really captures how general we're going here. And trying to encourage you to think outside the box and really influencing policy beyond the laws that are passed in Washington, D.C. or in your state capital. Policy is really important for holding on to change and making it institutionalized. The new practices through a policy change reinforce changes in norms and behavior that turns to ongoing support for policy and practice. It's like a self-feeding cycle. So you put good policy in, and then it affects how people are doing their jobs, and it further affects how the school climate is being enacted, what the feeling is on schools. We're going to look at several layers, but we're going to really focus on school policy development today. And it's important to remember there's all different levels and that they often feed into each other. There's national laws, state laws, local county ordinances, local agency and even organizational laws and handbooks, administrative policies, and then these school-based policies and regulations that really have an impact on the day-to-day life in schools. Start Strong was really unique and leading edge in this initiative by making policy one of the core components. And what it did is it really elevated the importance for all of the sites to build and develop relationships with policy stakeholders and to think critically about what kind of thing we want to see, what kind of policies we want to see enacted that will truly affect our students, parents, and staff in order to support healthy relationships. So policy is is a support that informs all the other systems in the Start Strong model. Social media, curriculum, teen influencers, and our direct interest working with 11 to 14-year-olds. The policy can institutionalize all this work in all of these sectors, and it also can reflect the advances in each of these sectors. But such like in Wichita, they were able to advance the curriculum 4th R to be systemically taught even after the initiative was over. That's a policy change directly based on curriculum.
Emily, thank you. I like this because what you're talking about with policy is how policy becomes another important tool that often sets the stage to be able to make effective change that we're trying to be able to create.
Absolutely.
Let's ask our audience a question, Emily. Why is school policy important? So I'd like to hear from our audience because I recognize many of the names of people here. Describe why the school policy is important in the work you're doing. So go ahead and write in. I see multiple people are writing their messages right now, and so we're still working on our sound for New Zealand. We got Sandra joining for school. Let's hear what people write. Why is school policy important? And Brent talks about it gives everyone boundaries, and so it sets sort of a set of common rules or common expectations or common understandings. And Rebecca says it's a foundation, and it reflects the commitment to what programs and initiatives can build. You can establish, you have that foundation. It's the law of the school community. It's the norms. It institutionalizes and sets up controls and consequences Christine talks about. It creates an accountable engagement among staff, and it can set the standards and expectations of for staff and the school culture, and it sets up procedures for dealing with all sorts of things, Rebecca points out. It can promote safety. So I'm seeing, Emily, there's a lot of really great idea. The accountability comes up and addresses multiple forms. Culture and expectations. I see a lot about culture, expectations, accountability, and foundation. That seems to be the theme that I'm noticing, Emily, in this discussion.
Yeah, and you guys build out the next slide, I think. That's exactly why we targeted school policy in this initiative. It is this foundational guide for staff and administrators and students and parents. And so it has an opportunity to really craft appropriate prevention strategies. And it has the opportunity for widespread social norms change. We know social norms change doesn't just occur with just one policy or just one curriculum. It's in concert with all these other factors. But policy is that important scaffolding foundation that can kind of house the accountability, the training, and the requirements that go into really having a prevention-focused campus. The other thing that was really important was it was important to name teen dating violence and not have it be a silent epidemic anymore. That was, about 10 years ago when we started doing this work, a lot of us, it was all about the silence around unhealthy relationships in teens. And now, really understand it's important to talk about healthy relationships and to not silence or ignore teen dating violence. When you add it to a school policy, you start building resources and allocating awareness and responsiveness. So you're requiring people to respond to it. You're adding that really important accountability moment. And you're able to monitor the incidents and outcomes better, which means we're going to be able to be gathering better data on what's really happening in our schools and where it's happening and what kind of prevention and intervention services are needed and what are appropriate and what are the good outcomes we can get. It also improves general school safety, and that translates to making it easier for students to actually learn on campus when they feel safe. And it supports the social norms change game. I mean, this is really that foundational support in order to make the changes that we need to see across everyone in the school community, not just kids learning to have healthy relationships, but really about staff. How are they modeling their relationships? How are they interacting with each other and with the students? And making our schools a place that really is about teaching a whole child in a coordinated response.
Well, thank you. So let's move to Barry, and if you can talk a little bit, Barry, about some of the model school policies that you can think about.
Hello, this is Barry, and I'm going to be introducing the actual school policy and toolkit to you. When I think about changing social norms on a campus, I think about making healthy relationships the norm so that abusive and disrespectful behaviors stand out and so that those behaviors are not acceptable to other students or to the adults on the campus. And part of that is really increasing confidence among the students that the adults are going to take this issue seriously and be effective at stopping it. And so the policy really can create systems that ultimately increase confidence among the students that reporting and intervening and telling someone are going to result in a positive outcome. And for me, that's the most important reason to adopt policy. So let me talk a little bit about how this policy and toolkit was designed. It was designed with a focus on creating a positive school climate as a way to prevent dating abuse before it happens. The resource is more than just a policy. It's really a complete guide for creating a comprehensive prevention program in middle and high schools. It's unique in its focus on prevention. It's describing the roles of students, parents, and educators in creating this positive learning environment. And it's intended to enhance existing school policies that may be in place already on bullying and sexual harassment so that students learn that they also have a right to be safe in their dating relationships. We want to address the full continuum of abuse in their lives and keep it from escalating and change those norms around those behaviors. This policy can help schools meet requirements under state and federal laws to address issues of bullying and sexual harassment and dating abuse in schools. It's really a must-have resource for everyone on the call today. So let's look at the building blocks of the policy and what you'll find when you download it and start using it. There are specific guidelines on how to select a prevention coordinator in your district. This is the person who's responsible for integrating the policy, the model policy, with the existing school policy and programs and training. Ideally, this person should be a school district administrator who has authority to allocate time and resources because that's going to be what's needed to make policy change. It's also important to have campus-level administrators who are designated to implement the policy and who can serve on existing teams at the campus level that address safety or school climate, social emotional learning, health, and other health and safety issues at the campus level so that an entire team can be trained on the campus, and that person we would call the prevention liaison. The third piece is education for students. There are a number of ways to do this. We can do a school-wide universal prevention program, and there are some evaluated resources in the toolkit to look for. We want to address characteristics and skills for healthy relationships, defining abusive and unhealthy relationships, looking for early warning signs, responsible use of technology. But we also want to integrate education through youth-led projects. This would be awareness and prevention projects that youth create themselves to influence their peers. Another way to educate students is through early interventions such as school-based support groups for those students who are at greater risk because of exposure to violence. So there are lots of ways to integrate prevention education. It can be into a core subject area. And it's great for students to hear these messages from different adults in their lives. So if the coach is teaching character ed and the health teacher is talking about healthy relationships and the after-school program is doing recreational activities around it, then they're getting a truly comprehensive message that is in different voices for the important adults in their lives. Training for staff is another component. We want staff to understand what they should do to identify and respond to behaviors that they see, how to intervene, and how to role model healthy relationships in the classroom. Parents and caregivers are an important piece. We can reach them through small group discussions, guest speakers, small conversations, individual meetings. Parents really want to know about their students' rights under the policy, to be safe, to be respected at school, and to how to file a complaint when they've been bullied or harassed or abused in some way. A key piece of the policy, of course, is response to dating abuse. And everyone on the campus needs to have a consistent protocol for how to respond and intervene. There should be a complaint form and a system for documenting complaints, for reporting, and for following up with disciplinary procedures and safety measures like implementation of protective orders and school-based stay-away agreements. These are all things that the adults on campus should be aware of, and this will help them take the issues seriously when they occur. The policy addresses reporting incidents, the importance of reporting and documenting and following up, and of monitoring the effectiveness of the overall program over time. And this always presents that dilemma of the more we increase awareness, the more we also increase reporting. It's important for us to include questions on climate surveys and in other ways of detecting the level of abuse that's happening in our schools. And finally, and I know this is a long one, but the policy addresses how to disseminate this information to parents and students in multiple ways, through written school code of conduct, posters, and other ways online where parents and students can access complaint forms, read the policy, and have access to prevention resources. So a lot in there, but I wanted you to get the full scope of what is included in the policy. Training and implementation. So once we have the policy developed, it needs to be in the hands and applied in by the teachers and other adults on campus. Students, parents, and administrators all have an important role, and they need to understand what that role is and how they can bring the policy to life. So the different ways of doing that would be staff training, classroom lessons, sessions with parents, again online and print resources, and really engaging our youth leaders in getting the word out. This is what dating abuse looks like. These are your rights under the district's policy. And communicating with the other allied groups in our communities that are concerned about mental health, social and emotional health, physical health, youth development, suicide prevention. All of these groups have a stake in promoting healthy relationships. And just adding on to that, engaging existing programs is important. We want to truly make this a district-wide endeavor, and we want to tie in with existing programs like social emotional learning. We want to partner with law enforcement and with other groups that are working on related issues. And one way we can do that is to develop specialized tools for these groups to help them address their unique needs. That can be curriculum, that can be screening instruments, it can be response protocols. So I think our role as advocates is to be a resource to these groups, to find mutual goals and projects, and to add our content into existing initiatives.
Barry, I just wanted to add one thing. In Los Angeles, we were able to join the executive committee on safety and violence prevention for our school district. And that was a key place where they were already organizing around these issues, and we got to bring our issue to the table. And so there will be places where there are programs coming together and collaborating already. It's finding them and inviting yourself and getting yourself a chair at the table.
Thank you, Emily. It's so true. And sometimes we can feel like the broken record. You know, what about dating abuse, in every meeting? But we have to be the voice that helps people understand that these issues are all related, that exposure to violence and abuse and involvement in unhealthy relationships increase your risk for teen pregnancy, STIs, further victimization and perpetration, and a whole host of serious health consequences. And the more we can, connect the dots, that's becoming, I think, our role in these community task forces.
Hey, did you want to show a little video clip that we had about youth influencers?
Oh, thank you, David. Yes, I do. I would like to show a brief clip of some of the different groups that we had the opportunity to work with through the Start Strong initiative the last few years.
Great, so go ahead, and it should be running.
Dating violence has no place in our society.
Start Strong has been a 4-year initiative funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to rally the community to prevent teen dating violence.
It has been a joy to work on the development of policy, programs, to get training when we need training.
What are the ways to address the things you do see, the things that we can stop?
We had an incident on campus. I made a phone call, and immediately we had people willing and able to do some training with our staff to ensure we understand the definitions and what to do. These are the skills that teachers need, reinforcement and refining, and help them help our kids.
Throughout our entire lives, our relationships affect our health. And so the school nurses, they're often the first adults that might recognize that a young person is in an unhealthy or an abusive relationship.
What we ended up doing over the course of the 4 years was provide a lot of staff development training to our nurses, usually 2 or 3 times a year.
The most important thing about this program is that it raises the level of awareness around teen dating abuse with not only nurses, school staff, even among parents, community members.
What do you guys think a person that you like should have? What does this person look like? How does this...
Another great opportunity is to see them after school. And that's one of the reasons why we partner with the Boys and Girls Club. They have an amazing connection with the youth in their area.
One of the things that we wanted to do to outreach to parents and their young people that are going to be coming into middle school, we partnered with the Austin Project, basically create workshops based on what parents feel they need in order to help their children.
Tell other people things your partner asks you to keep secret. It depends. It depends.
I feel that they need strong role models and need more information to make smart decisions in their life, and I like to provide that information.
One of the things that we wanted to do to outreach to parents and their young people that are going to be coming into middle school, we partnered with the Austin Project.
Basically create workshops based on what parents feel they need in order to help their children be successful.
So coming into the meeting here, it gave me a new perspective, and my kids are a lot more open now by me using those strategies, those techniques.
Me platica que ya tiene novio.
The trust between my daughter and I was developed. Because of this program, we're able to have conversations about her boyfriend, how their relationship is going.
You know, every year we try to do something a little more. And this year it was going live with a website devoted to teen dating violence prevention, student-on-student sexual harassment prevention, and bullying, cyberbullying. We want to give them an opportunity to anonymously be able to report, making it as easy as possible for them to get the word to us if indeed they have a...
Thank you, David, for showing that. I'll move on to how important it is to involve your youth leaders. Now, these may be students who are already in a leadership role. They may be students in athletics or theater or student council, or you can create a new group just for this purpose. But it helps to engage them in defining the problem, talking to adults about the problem, and coming up with clever ways to influence their peers. It really comes down to youth-generated content, and you can't beat that. They know the messages that will resonate with their peers, and that can be through writing, posters, theater. All different creative arts are important to bring to the table.
And Barry, I just wanted to add, this is Emily, that our youth leaders are also instrumental in advocating for policy change themselves. We have youth leaders that speak and provide testimony at the state and local level around the need for these type of policy changes. And it's gotten to the point at LA Unified School District where they actually straight up tell us, we don't want to hear from you guys about the statistics. We want to hear from the young people about the impact on their lives and what prevention really means to them and how it's helped them become youth that are better engaged in their society. And it's also come to the point that now our mayor is convening youth summits and youth meetings where he's trying to get a pulse on what young people need in the community. And having those youth leaders there that understand healthy relationships is really critical.
You can't beat that. I mean, they can make the most compelling case. It's authentic, and it's really relevant to their lives. So great. Thanks for including that, too. All right. And I just want to say one more thing about this. Many groups of youth on a campus are looking for service learning credit. They need it, community service hours. This is a way that they can make their school a better place. And if you can somehow issue credit for their time and their effort for these things, then all the better. And get the support for some of those adults on campus that require those service learning credits. Okay. And so finally, for me here, I want to just take a moment to say that there are many youth in our schools who are exposed to violence and abuse already at home and in their communities and in their dating relationships. And a universal prevention curriculum may not be enough to meet their needs. One way to support them is to offer a school-based support group during school hours where they can easily access, come to group, be released from class, confidential, safe setting for them to talk about their experiences with other teens who have had similar experiences. If you are a counseling or advocacy center, this may be a service that you can provide that a school will appreciate and really depend on. You can be there to consult when there's been an incident on how to increase safety for the victim, how to talk with the family, how to provide help and early intervention for the accused. These are all services that schools need from us, and and that we can provide. We are the experts, and this is an important resource for them. And I think we have a clip here of one of the Expect Respect support groups in a school.
I've experienced violence throughout.
You are no longer muted.
Well, I told
Yes,
someone in
have been
between
muted.
times,
You
but
can
no one really
unmute your
listened.
line by pressing
I didn't
star
trust
6.
them enough to tell them all the way through.
He put me down and threatened me, and I wouldn't let me go anywhere without him.
He tried to pressure me into having sex, and I wasn't ready to have sex.
We cast the net wide to attract as many kids who have had any form of victimization at all to participate.
It just takes a toll on everything. You're worried about this, or you're not concentrating on your work, or you're not doing something right, or you don't perform well athletically because of it.
I lost all my friends. I completely lost who I was. I had no personality. I had nothing because he cut me down and destroyed my self-esteem.
It just made me angry all the time. I never really had a smile, or I was never happy, so I was just always mad and violent.
The support at school is what made me survive.
Being in the group has helped me realize that it's not my fault, that it was his fault.
If there is an angry situation at my house, I can learn just to blow it off and focus on the most important thing, which is school.
This is a critical time to intervene. It's a situation where a little bit of help goes a long way.
Thanks, David.
Okay, great. So, Barry, any last comments you want to make about this video, or should we move on to Emily to talk about strategies?
I'll just add that having a support group at school can help the most vulnerable students stay in school, and that's something that schools appreciate. It's very difficult for them to learn or even to show up when they're living with violence and abuse, and you can make the case that this can really help the most vulnerable students, the students most at risk of becoming victims and perpetrators, stay in school and learn some new skills. So, voting for school-based support services.
Great. Well, thank you, Barry. So let's move on to have Emily come in and talk to us. I'm going to advance the slide here. And Emily, if you can, let's talk about the strategy that we would work on trying to be able to integrate some of these issues.
Great. What we're going to kind of share now is some of the lessons we really learned, both in developing the model policy and then working in our different sites to implement it and to get it passed and to adapt it for our communities. The first questions are about how to really delve into policy change in your system, and I really want to encourage you to try and to add policy as one of your primary core strategies when you're going forward with your prevention work. So I think I'd love to start with just a little bit of a polling question, David.
Great. So this question, let's ask this question, Emily. I think this is a great question of with whom have you worked with at schools to establish policies? Let's get a brainstorming right into the text chat. What are some of those places with whom have you worked with to establish policies? And we're using policies, right, Emily, in this broad sense, the Webster definition, not just.
Absolutely.
But let's get a sense of with whom have you worked with on policies, on school policies. So let's see. So Leslie talks about the superintendent and educators. And so the superintendent works at a district level and often in an administrative function. Then there's educators. And there's, now people are writing in quickly. So superintendent, principals, admin staff, and fellow board members. So Shelley implies that she's a school board member and superintendent, teachers, students, parents, administrators, community agencies, counselors. So I see a theme of a lot of superintendents, administrators, teachers, nurses, Board of Education councils like a Title I council, working with the local DV agencies and the school board, principals, counselors, school nurse, teen parent teacher, wherever I can get an open door.
I know, yeah.
The superintendent, principal, teacher, nurses, guidance, school workers, cluster reps, teachers, parents. So I think we're getting a good range of places. No one, interestingly, has said state legislature or federal federal legislature yet.
And we've even had some success in the initiative in Indiana. There was statewide law passed after the Start Strong Indiana folks went and talked to a legislator up there. So there is that opportunity when you find someone that really cares about these issues that you could really affect statewide change. And for some of these smaller states, that's really powerful because that's going to change the entire climate of the state, hopefully, if it's implemented correctly and funded and all these other things that come up when we actually pass laws. So where do we really start on this policy change? And I'm really going to go back away from the state law level to looking at the district as well, because there's state laws and education codes that affect how the public schools within the district and even the charter and private schools within the state function. So you can change state level laws. You can even change national level laws that fund the state level programs. Then at the district level, and all these districts are slightly differently organized, but in general, the district has a school board and a superintendent. And those are two administrative heads that can affect different policy changes for the overall district. Then within the district, there's the multiple different school sites. So those could be your middle schools, your high schools, your elementary schools, your adult schools. And at each of those sites, there's policy change opportunities also. That can be through the principal or head counselor adapting a new policy, adding in something about healthy relationships into parent-student handbooks. The law has really seen that handbooks are a form of codified policy. So when you can infiltrate a handbook, you're really creating a policy change. The other levels are community. So changing things on the city or county level can affect local education. And there's a lot of other types of ways to affect policy change. One of those could be your own personal organization. As a domestic violence or sexual assault agency, what are your prevention strategies? What are your policies towards working with minors, working with teens? We're going to talk, and I'll try and weave it through some of the mandatory reporting in the text chat. But one of those troubling issues is how do you respond to mandatory reporting laws in peer-to-peer abuse? And one of the places to turn is to have organizational policy on how you respond to that and to train everyone on the approach. So once you figure out kind of what your system looks like and where you might want to start with policy change, it's really important to think about your entry points. And when we talk about strategy, we're going to consider a lot of different time frames, and we had 11 sites that were all struggling to do policy change in a 4-year period. And we have a lot of lessons from that and how things can accelerate incredibly fast and how things can go incredibly slow. But finding entry points and multiple entry points is really key. Think about the strategic partnerships and like-minded movements and trends you see on campus or in your community and in your schools. Relationship building is really important, and it will come up again and again when I talk about strategy. The importance of partnering on projects, on cross-educating with different issues, on research and documenting the interconnectivity of issues. One of the successes we've had in Los Angeles is partnering with anti-gang violence movements and gang intervention specialists to be able to both document the connection of relationship abuse to gang activity, as well as to make their approaches more informed about promoting healthy relationships, understanding dynamics of power and control that take place in a gang life and also take place in unhealthy relationships was a really interesting cross-educational moment and a kind of aha moment when working with the movement to end our community violence in Los Angeles. it actually led to policy changes with our police department and with the LA City Attorney's Office. So now they're working and documenting gang-related crimes, prosecutions, and interventions with the eye towards domestic violence. And that was a huge change in what's happening down here. So I'm going to list a couple ideas. You guys probably have a bunch of ideas. I'd encourage you in the chat, even though this isn't a polling question, if you have entry points that have worked for you or unlikely bedfellows that you found along the way in working with schools and instituting change, I'd love you to share. We've worked with anti-bullying and sexual harassment, gang prevention, violence prevention, LGBTQ and hate crimes, suicidality, and also connected with bullying, teen pregnancy prevention, school climate change, school-based health centers, and leadership development. So that last one is really great because it's a positive way to working with the schools. In Los Angeles, we start STOP clubs, which are students together organizing peace. And they're student-led leadership groups that let them bring peacemaking activities onto campus. And they're all trained with an eye to look at gender-based violence. So that is key to their perspective in the world. Yeah, parents with children with special needs, really important group. And parents in general can be a fabulous entry point. Parents, from a policy perspective, this is kind of a side point, but policy perspective, parents are the consumer for schools. So if you can influence parents and help parents organize around policy change, they can make a huge impact on your school, because that's who's complaining about, what Bobby or Billy or Sally or what's happening in school is parents and caregivers for the most part. So when we get them involved as organizing advocates, it's really very powerful. Yeah, and a youth advisory council for the city council, Leslie said. I think that's really great. Getting a youth voice into policy is one of my passions, and I found it to be really, really beneficial. So how do you make this case? Once you maybe have targeted or identified a few people that would be key stakeholders or entry points, it's really important to clearly articulate the importance of adopting policy change for the many reasons we said at the top of the presentation. And that's why we kind of write those out to give you a stepping point for making the case. You're going to need to define and show the prevalence of teen dating violence and talk about why prevention is a good thing for the school. And it is important when you can to connect to evidence-based or evidence-informed research that shows that prevention is a good thing. Even though we all know it in our heads, a lot of administrators and stakeholders want to see the direct connection. Also, you need to know your community and find the data about your community, or even create the data about your community. Aaron's here from Mountain Crisis Services, and I know that he and Allison worked with their community to develop data that showed prevalence of teen dating violence or unhealthy relationships in the community. And that was really important. They had to create that data themselves. It didn't exist before. It's also really important to know the context of your school or community. Know what trends are happening at the community and state and local level. Is your state superintendent really into safety at schools, or is he really or she really into social emotional learning, changing social norms? Kind of see what things are trauma-informed care at schools. Yeah, thanks, Erin, for the link. Also connect to academic success, because we know when kids are safe at school, they do better academically. We also know that teen dating violence is associated with a host of high-risk behaviors, and connecting to those high-risk behaviors builds you partnerships and also make the case for why you're part of the school climate change movement or the entry point you're attempting to connect to. Connect to the liabilities, and there's a lot more to this, but I'm going to drop it here, and then also in the appendix of the model policy, we talk about the legal ramifications of dating violence on campus. But Title IX has direct connection to peer-to-peer sexual harassment and schools' requirement to not be deliberately indifferent to peer-to-peer sexual harassment. There are some kinds of there are some types of teen dating violence that could very well be sexual harassment, and it is unclear really in the law how much Title IX can be brought to case on this, but we feel from the White House's papers recently on it that it really is going to be a Title IX issue as well as a healthy relationships issue. So tying to those liabilities, schools can be liable for not reporting, for not responding, for being indifferent, can really open up the eyes of some of the administrators you might be working with. In Los Angeles, it is the thing that gets us our model policy through our council, our legislative council, and our legal team for the school district, because they know those laws well, and they know that there are liabilities tied to failing to respond.
Hi, this is Barry. Can I interrupt
Yeah,
there, too?
absolutely.
I would say the same in Austin. It's really been our district's Title IX coordinator who has been our champion on this issue and on policy development that's happened here. You can help the district reduce its liability under Title IX by being proactive and putting prevention programs and policies in place.
Absolutely. And it really, they see that in dollar signs, they see that in resources, and they see it in their PR. They see it as really impacting the entire school district. The other thing the school districts are really concerned about is money. So when you can connect this issue to lower truancy rates, to the fact that promoting healthy relationships may reduce violence and discipline responses on campus, to saving lives, that has both an emotional pull but also a fiscal impact. And that is can be really critical in making a case as well, showing them savings. And it's hard because we're always documenting the cost of a lot of our interventions and responses that are failing. And it's hard to shift that paradigm to look at the savings of prevention. I know chat's going crazy. I'm trying to keep an eye on it, but I'm going to have to let it go and keep going.
Let it
with
go.
Messaging yeah. Thanks, David. Messaging and language. What language do we use, and how do we frame this issue is critical. What language we use can be, whether we're using a culturally specific language like English or Mandarin or Spanish, and also how are we framing the issue? Are we talking about it in an age-appropriate manner when we're talking to middle schoolers versus high schoolers versus parents? Are we being culturally competent and inclusive? Do we have people on staff and partners that represent the wide, diverse swath of our community? And also, we need to pay attention to tone. Positive messaging is talking about promoting healthy relationships, and that can really be kind of vague, but it instantly connects us with bullying, with other violence prevention movements on campus, with just the idea of raising young people and supporting young people to have healthy, successful lives, versus negative messaging like the epidemic of teen dating violence, which really talks about the sensational cases and talks about the danger. I'm not saying that the danger and the warning signs and all those kind of things are not important, but I feel like the positive messaging when you're trying to promote policy change can be critical to getting a lot of more supporters on with you and supporting you and also contributing what they feel healthy relationships are.
Emily, let me add, this is Barry.
Oh, sure.
We found that the terms victim, perpetrator, survivor, even dating violence are not terms that are well received in schools. They don't fit with language that's used in other ways. It's helpful to talk about students who have experienced this, students who have demonstrated this behavior. And we have found it's also just more respectful and conveys the sense that we are teaching young people to have healthy relationships.
Absolutely.
We don't want to label them any more than they're already labeled.
And even the term teen dating violence doesn't even resonate with young people. They might not consider what they're doing dating. When you say violence, it's all about someone hitting someone. It's about physical violence. And
let's face
teen
it,
is a very small window.
And there's a lot of mutually unhealthy and disrespectful behavior going on in schools, and the kids know it and the adults know it. And we have to be flexible in the way we describe what's happening.
Yeah, and not pull teen dating violence completely out of the context of the other things that are happening on campus and with young people developmentally. I mean, it's really a critical part of what's happening at school.
This is Debbie. I just want to underscore that it was a huge discussion point in the development of the policy between the communities around this language, which Barry pointed out, because also when we were working with middle school range, we really found that we wanted to instill more of a philosophy. Clearly there are, very serious incidences that have to be dealt with in quicker and immediate ways. But with this younger age group, we also saw that these were really important opportunities to intervene early and take the opportunity not to stigmatize people, but to really use these as teachable moments. And so the whole thing of labeling was a big issue that was discussed greatly.
Yeah, thanks, Debbie. And I remember being on some of those calls and trying to figure out how can we frame this so we are supporting change and development and true prevention. So recruiting and utilizing champions, to kind of change gears a little bit, is really this key idea of creating relationships. And we kind of define champions as those people with a stake and a say that are able to make changes happen in your school area. We're kind of focusing on school districts right now and school campuses. Who's willing to make a stand on the issue of healthy relationships? And there might be at all different levels. What's really important is not to just cultivate leadership at the upper echelons of your administration, not just the superintendent, not just the principal or vice principal, but look at those influential teachers on campus. Who is the charismatic leaders, the up-and-coming charismatic leaders in your school, so that you can make a better connection to upcoming champions and also build and help scaffold their rise to being someone that can really influence policy. Really important to network and build awareness in the school with and through champions, because champions can introduce you to other stakeholders and to other people that will take on this issue. The other thing is be there for your champion. If you have a wonderful school board member that has worked with us since he was a teacher and counselor, and when he calls and he needs someone to come and provide testimony at a school board meeting or be able to be there on an issue or educate his staff, we are there immediately. We have the relationship to cross-educate and to be reciprocal and work together across the range of youth issues that we deal with. Face-to-face meetings, you can't beat them. If you can get into a room with someone and get to know them, it is really important. And food is a key part to that. I know no one funds food anymore, but when you can get people together and breaking bread together, it's just basic organizing. It is going to be the thing that changes the world, I feel. Also important to learn about the processes of the school district and the bureaucracies so you know what your champions are dealing with. Try and cultivate like-minded leadership, but don't avoid unlikely champions. You might see someone that maybe doesn't agree with all your philosophical things, but really cares about parent-child relationships. And that might be an opportunity to increase parent workshops and to work with parents and caregivers in a more inclusive manner and talking about healthy relationships. And remember to support your champions with leadership and development growth. what's been key to us in Los Angeles is really connecting our champions with our organization as a whole, so they really understand what we do, and to be there for them as they are moving and changing their careers. All right, David, back to you.
So let's ask a question of our audience, I think, on champions. Who are those potential policy champions in your school? I'd love to hear the experience and the range. I know for me, my experience with when we look at champions, I know working with the PTA and getting a parent leader from the PTA was really helpful, and Brenda just jumps in right there with the exact same point. So where else are some champions that you have, or potential champions? School administrators, the board, the PTO. I think sometimes thinking a little bit of outside the box, sometimes the athletic director. I know one person I was working with lived next door to the athletic director for the school district and then became a great opportunity. Parents with influence and expertise, drama teachers, parents with social emotional training and professions, and the curriculum director, Leslie talks about. And I know other people are typing in. So Emily, I'm seeing a lot of different potential champions, the school psychologists, board members, multiple staff, director of health education, school psychologist, school nurse, students of journalism and their teacher.
Great.
Oh, Lisa, that I'm sure there's a good story there.
Yeah, and maybe the yearbook staff.
And the yearbook staff. Okay, maybe we're learning more about our high school years. But who the people are. So great. So university partners, the Campus Women's Center, guidance counselors, parents. Barry talks about athletic directors. And so there's a lot of people that are some opportunities to really think broadly. So Emily, let's talk about, I think maybe the journalism teacher will be the entree.
Exactly.
Of how we can use media outreach to help complement this work.
Right, and I think there are a lot of moments and opportunities when working with the media, and we kind of need to educate ourselves in the prevention field about how to shift the value of prevention policies from just criminal response and intervention to real, true, meaningful prevention strategies. Time and time again, I've sat in an interview with a reporter about sensational story, a murder, something outrageous that's happened around violence against women, and they don't want to talk about prevention because that is not as sensational as talking about the case. But when you can walk that line where you're talking a little bit about the sensational case, but also about what are the prevention strategies that may have worked, what do we need to do to prevent this from happening again in the future, it's a critical moment, and you're actually educating the reporter and journalist along with you and along with the community when they air a piece that has a prevention focus on it or adds a prevention piece. When the Rihanna and Chris Brown initial story hit, our organization was asked to be interviewed around the case, and we were able to insert a prevention beat on it. We were able to talk about, well, what can we do in our schools and with our young people so that they know what healthy relationships are, that they have the self-esteem and confidence and self-efficacy to be able to create those relationships for themselves and be able to talk to their adults when they need help. So know that going in. Talking to the media is really hard around this issue in particular because people don't want to talk about prevention. Also really important to know your media sources and outlets. Who is the beat coverage for your schools? Or who cares about education stuff that's happening on the state level? What is the local coverage? What are state and national news sources? What are print, blog, video sources? And then maybe one of the most inexpensive and could be highly impactful ways to work with media and outreach to media is to create your own media. And it's very powerful in this age with social marketing, social networking. And you can create and reach a large audience. That's why it's a core component of the Start Strong initiative, but you can utilize those same things to push for policy changes in your community. It's also a great way to bring in the youth influencers. So here we have young high schoolers creating PSAs that are aired in the school or aired on YouTube and educate and also ask for a change, a call to action event. So it's really a powerful way to use media to ask for change and demand change in your community. Be prepared to keep the media outlet in connection with your work once you make an initial connection and bring the topic back. Just try and find some media resources on education for yourself, because it's really important to be able to steer these interviews back to prevention, but it's often very difficult to do. The other thing, and we're going to pause and talk a little bit about timing and opportunities now, and this is when the media can be knocking on your door for a statement or for an interview, is aligning to current events and policy efforts. There'd be big news stories, celebrity news, and it's an easy moment to educate about your policy work. So don't only respond to the situation as a domestic violence sexual assault agency, but also look towards how can we be promoting prevention policy change when we're talking to the media around these events. Same with awareness months. In February, April, we've used those months as an opportunity to bring our young people in front of the school board and talk about the policy changes that we want to see and what's currently going on in campus. We've also been able to hold rallies on school that then get media coverage. So, and it's a moment when our youth are leaders in advocating for policy change, they can easily have those talking points and talk about it as well. There's also other policy efforts to align with. So if your state is looking at something around changing educational code around safety at schools or violence prevention, look at those as opportunities to insert relationship violence, gender-based violence, and prevention policies within that legislation, or advocate for your own legislation at the state level. Policy often happens in reaction to an event or a particular case, and we've seen this in California in the wake of the O.J. Simpson, Nicole Brown case. It was a watershed moment for domestic violence laws in California and the nation. It's really important to be prepared for these opportunities. So even if you think it's way off, your policy change is really going slow and it's way off in the future, the time is now to think about what kind of changes you want to make, so that if there is an opportunity, you're poised to have those conversations that can be critical and can really serve as the moment where change can happen. I want to share a little bit about Cindy Santana. She was stabbed by her ex-boyfriend, Abraham, on Southeast High School, LA Unified School District High School, on September 30th, 2011. And we work in that area. Peace Over Violence, Start Strong Los Angeles works in this area. And the case rocked our organization because it felt so unnecessary. We were trying so hard to create policy change so something like this would not happen. And here the worst happened, and 2 young people's lives are ruined. Abraham's going to be in the criminal justice system, and Cindy's gone. And we struggled to find the appropriate messaging and the media outreach, and were really kind of self-traumatized by this incident, being a domestic violence agency and sexual assault agency. But we were prepared because we were working on the initiative and had been working on policy for a long time. We knew what we wanted to make happen, and in fact, our policy was already before the school board when this happened. The other critical point of the Cindy Santana case was Cindy, in our eyes, did everything right. Like, she talked to her mom. They notified law enforcement. He had been taken into custody for criminal threats. They then went and talked to an administrator at the school. And that's where something may have not happened that should have happened. And that's where policy change can really change and save lives. If teen dating violence is taken seriously, it's going to require the support and the resources and the services of the school to protect both the potential Cindys and the Abrahams, and get them connected to services. It's also going to change the climate, we hope, so that Abraham knows where to go and has someone to talk to if he's feeling these feelings. And it's not something that is hidden from the school site. So it was a really harsh lesson for us. In the wake of that, our policy was adopted by the school board. And there was a lot of support because of this timing opportunity. So there was a lot of people that were suddenly seeing that teen dating violence was an issue. I don't know if any of you guys have been told by administrators or even parents or leaders that you talk to that, oh, that doesn't happen in our school. We don't have teen dating violence or domestic violence in our school. And this case in and of itself just showed that, yes, it happens, and it's deadly, and it's serious, and we need to do something to prevent it. So I'd love to share the video that kind of shows the story and a little bit about our media outreach around the case.
It's something no teenager should have to deal with, dating violence. Now the LA Unified School District is stepping up its effort to protect teens. The proposal was already in the works, but comes nearly 2 weeks after a deadly stabbing at a high school in Southgate. Eyewitness News reporter Rudabeh Shabazi takes a closer look at the changes being made on campus.
It was a unanimous vote at the Los Angeles Unified School Board meeting today, a resolution aimed at preventing teen dating violence and creating prevention strategies in schools.
Children cannot learn, and they cannot achieve, and they cannot graduate if they are not first safe.
For many students and school staff members, this was the most recent cautionary tale. A stabbing at Southeast High School last month that left 17-year-old Cindy Santana dead after her ex-boyfriend, Abraham Lopez, allegedly stabbed her on campus. Another student and a dean were also stabbed trying to stop it.
That could have been me. That could have been the other girl who got beat up, who I saw at school.
But those pushing for the resolution say it was in the works a decade before what happened at Southeast High.
There's a kind of irony to the fact that this tragedy happened just as we were about to get to this place. But we are here now, and it is a wake-up call, and it is a call to action.
The program would designate a coordinator on every campus, someone students can go to who's trained to handle such situations, and focus on training staff, parents, and students to recognize warning signs and promote healthy relationships.
To students out there who today feel afraid, uncomfortable, insecure, know that something is just not right. Please say something. Don't be silent.
The program will cost an estimated $2 million a year, and board members are working now to figure out how to fund it. Reporting at LA Unified School District headquarters, Rudabeh Shabazi, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Well, thank you, Emily, for doing that, and I think it illustrates really profoundly how we need to be prepared to be able to use these opportunities to advance this, and we've seen this with many other issues. You know, I've seen what's happening in Ohio after the Steubenville rape case. It's creating opportunities to create change also. On to Gary to talk about going beyond the schools, not just in the schools, but to think about also beyond the schools.
Okay. When we think about going beyond the schools, for me, I think about the other places where youth live, the organizations, the after-school programs, the residential runaway homeless youth programs, foster care agencies, juvenile justice system, places where youth are together with other youth. It's important that the policies in those facilities clearly define how students should treat one another, what to do if you are being abused or harassed by anyone, another student or an adult, what your rights are. And when these policies are in place, then the staff in those organizations, which sometimes the frontline staff turn over a lot, and they really need to be very clear on how to intervene when they see an incident happening or when they get a report or a disclosure. So turning to our community partners that work with youth and asking to review policies. So how can we enhance this? How can we develop staff training and maybe bring curriculum into these other settings? And that's an important role we can play. I'd also like to talk about how we can help influence planning and funding decisions at the community level. One of the examples here in Austin is our local Ready by 21 Coalition of Central Texas. This is an organization that aims to connect a comprehensive system of services and support to prepare young people to be ready for higher education, work, healthy lives, social and civic connections and engagement. And part of the role of this group is to develop a dashboard of indicators to monitor children's health and well-being and to tell the story of how children are doing in Central Texas. So, the data can be used to help leaders make better decisions about policies and funding and major initiatives. So Safe Place helped identify indicators of children's social and emotional health for this dashboard by looking at items on the School Safety and Substance Survey, which is administered to students in grades 6 through 12 each year. And it's a survey that asks about a lot of different behaviors, and we were able to get one question on there about have you experienced hurtful or controlling dating behavior. So now we have a couple of years of data to show what % of our students report that this is happening. And that once you get those indicators, that can be part of community level planning. So that's just one example. Another example of partnering with a non-school-based entity is a project we're doing with a teen pregnancy prevention program to change gender norms around to change social norms around gender. And this has been really interesting because we've found that the terminology and the philosophies of the teen pregnancy prevention providers and the domestic and sexual violence prevention advocates can be different in many ways, even though we share similar goals. And so we've been able to bring content to that program that focuses on sexual coercion and how getting sexual consent and how do you know if you have it and what it looks like and how to respect a partner's sexual limits. And that has not typically been part of the content of teen pregnancy prevention. So really important to partner with those kinds of providers as well. All right. We are getting to the end of our conference here, and we just want to summarize with a few key considerations. Over the past 5 years, the Start Strong sites have been involved in developing tools and strategies and this model. And there's really been a national dialogue that's happening, and a lot of leadership has been built in communities throughout the U.S. You can look on the Start Strong website and see a wealth of information and tools that you can use, including this model policy. But let's talk about some of the challenges we still face and the things that are still left to do. Challenges. Lack of awareness or prioritization of teen dating violence and its impact in our community. Who cares is really the question. Do people see this as a problem? Often young people, they're not seeing this as a high visible problem in the school. They're not thinking of themselves as being in abusive relationships or their friends. Adults on campus might not be identifying this as an important issue, and parents certainly, this is not high on their list of concerns about their children's health and safety. So it's really on us to ask ourselves, why is it that learning how to have a safe and healthy relationship is not the priority that it should be, and what can we do to change that? One of the ways is to find sources of local data to substantiate the need. And it may be a question on a survey. it can also be very compelling to just bring youth to the table to talk about their own experiences and to bring them together so they can start talking to each other and breaking down some of the social isolation that goes along with being in an abusive relationship. Competing community interests. There are so many important health and safety issues, and again, our issue doesn't always rise to the top. Sometimes it's suicide or mental health or substance abuse, and we just need to be present as much as we can be to draw those connections and make those links. Keep bringing people back to the common denominator for many of all of these issues is exposure to violence and abuse. And policies themselves are not prevention tools, or if they're not implemented and if they don't get other people engaged. So this is a challenge to constantly be implementing, looking for new ways to for the policy to inform other initiatives. And difficulties with implementation and dissemination. It's people are barraged with information. But if we can create a website or a place on a school website where the school policy lives and resources for students, parents, and educators can be found, I think that will go a long way.
Barry, this is Emily. I just wanted to add, as we move in Los Angeles towards implementation and enforcement of the policy, it's really important when you're developing your policy to have a mechanism for enforcement. This could be through connecting the issue to Title IX, the school requirements to respond to and educate on sex discrimination and sexual harassment, or it can be through designating a position. That's why that is a part of the model policy. To have someone that is in charge and then have reports or monitoring elements within that, as well as dissemination. So it's not enforceable unless we can see what's actually happening. We need some transparency.
Exactly.
The overall challenge, the challenge is all those mechanisms for enforcement are expensive. That's money, time, resources, and that's the first thing that tends to be struck from any proposed policy change. So I'm really keeping it real here. I'm trying to encourage you to keep on trying to enforcement and implementation plans into your policy and policy development.
So one creative way that our district here in Austin has addressed this new school year is to designate an ombudsman. This was an existing position in the district, and now that person has become the Title IX coordinator as well, and her role is really to implement and enforce the policy. So whenever there's an incident, it gets reported to her, and she's responsible for following up and making sure that the policy has been followed, the support services have been offered, the parents have been notified and engaged, and everything has been documented. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out in the coming year.
Well, great. Let's move on and talk about flexibility, Barry.
Okay, so this is the challenge for us all. It's how to remain flexible and yet to maintain continuity over time. And it sounds like an impossible task. But there are so many changes in our environment, changes in personnel, both in our agencies and in the school districts that we're working with. There's changes in funding, the grants that come and go, and changes in community and school needs. What's the new initiative? Is it social emotional learning? Is it bullying prevention? Is it anti-discrimination? And how we can be flexible with our message and with our strategies to support and enhance those changing needs. As far as I have a few comments to make about changes in personnel. I think it's so important in our agencies to hire well and to our staff. We need talented people to stay in these jobs. When we have a new person, each year it's very hard to maintain relationships and build credibility and get into the higher level policy and planning that we want to accomplish. And sometimes our positions turn over more quickly than we want. We want to build relationships across school departments So, and involve the our agency director, board, staff, so that the relationship isn't based on one person at the school and one person at the agency. It's easy for that to happen because we're spread so thin, but the more we can build multiple connections in a broad way, the more that we will be considered a reliable partner over time, and that's our goal. I think we have to be flexible in what we offer and really listening to what are the needs that the school has. And to know that, we need to be present at some of those meetings. We need to be meeting with different groups. And we need to be able to speak up and say, I'd like to submit a proposal for this. We can help you with this. And the this is what really needs to be flexible for us to be remain relevant. And
yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add, this is Emily again, that being a resource for the school has been really key to our relationship building. So going in with this is how the Start Strong model builds on itself, right? So you go in and you're doing the curriculum delivery and you're meeting with the teachers and you're becoming a familiar face to the administrator, and then you're able to have that one-on-one conversation and talk about changes that could happen at the school and get invited to the table to make those policy changes happen, or invite yourself to the table. And it's really important to strive for that feedback loop, right, with the community and your schools, so that you're understanding and supporting what they're going through at the same time they're learning about the issue of healthy relationships and preventing dating violence.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Emily. I want to move on because we only have a few minutes left, and I want Debbie, can you share about some of the resources that are being available? Because we've been talking about this Toolkit, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about it? Put a link to it also in the chat.
Yes. Well, on this slide, you can see here the link both to the model policy. And in the appendices, there's really all kinds of resources, issues around that address legal considerations, the research. There's a lot of information about monitoring policies because, of course, if you have a policy, it's, as Barry has said, you know, what is important is how do we get it implemented so that it's effective. So there are a lot of worksheets and sample forms. The policy really is a document that we understand that it's to be torn apart, taken parts and pieces, infused into policies that you may already have or integrated. A lot of schools are moving in the direction of addressing bullying, sexual harassment all together, and so we want to see teen dating violence a part of that. So there is also, as noted here, an advocacy toolkit, which is actually written by Emily Austin here, which summarizes many of the tips and insights on how you pass policies that have been highlighted both by Barry and Emily. I just want to say thank you to the two leaders here today. These two people really, I must say, have 20 and 30 years of experience in policy. It's kind of their lifeblood. You can see them really get going. I mean, both of them do lots of work on the ground with youth, and I think they also hold a lot of passion for working with the kids themselves and seeing how their voices and our next generation can really be different and support the kinds of policies change that can happen. And inevitably, if we're working in this way and incorporating those voices in the next generation, there will not be a question that these sorts of policies should be in place.
Well, thank you, Debbie, and I want to be able to, if this is a time for you to be able to do questions, we're not going to do that. I also want to highlight that the next Start Strong webinar is going to be on the Start Strong evaluation, and this will be held on September 17th at 2 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Central, 12 o'clock Mountain, 11 o'clock Pacific time. I do not know what time it will be in New Zealand, but we'll let Sam answer that question for us. So any questions that people had? There was a question about mandatory reporting, and Eileen was asking about that, and that's a challenging issue because every state has a different policy, and so that becomes, but that's a really interesting question about how to be able to deal with mandatory reporting and how that creates protections and challenges for us as we're moving forward. Anyone want to, in 15 seconds, want to quickly answer that?
I do a lot of, this is Emily, I do a lot of work around this within California specifically. And some highlights of what we want to think about is we want to be upfront and open with our young people when we're talking to them about our limits of the law. What are our mandatory reporting requirements? We need our staff to understand those requirements very well and understand what is a mandatory report and what could be discretionary. And it's really important to have policies set up in your organization so that you can sustain healthy relationships with young people and inspire trust in confidential communications. So I know that Break the Cycle has also done work on this, and I would also welcome any emails, Emily@peaceoverviolence.org, specifically on mandatory reporting.
Right, and to see how people interpret different state statutes, because Emily did refer to the notion of what's mandatory, and every state has a little bit, and it's not always as crystal clear as we might think it is. But unfortunately, we are at the time, so I want to thank, I really want to thank Barry and Emily for sharing with their vast years of experience with us. I want to thank Debbie for joining us, co-hosting today. I want to thank Lisa and Timmy, who are doing all the work on the background to really make a difference, and look forward to seeing all of you on the next Start Strong webinar regarding evaluation. I'll be on September 17th. So with this, we'll conclude today's webinar, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one on September 17th. A recording